So today's this Meet the Expert webinar series is an initiative that was started by FRC, the Family Resource Center, to bring out aspects to on developmental disabilities and related conditions. And the aim was to make expert advice available to families. And when we say expert advice, it's not just the medical person or professionals in the field, but recognizing parents and individuals themselves as the experts and bringing them to be part of this panel. So this webinar follows the format of a panel discussion where we have a medical expert, a parent advocate, and a self-advocate. Okay, so let me just introduce the panelists. So while I'm introducing, maybe the spotlight can be on the panelists. So we have Archana Patil. So Milton, if you can help me with that, having them spotlighted. Yeah. So Archana, when I asked Archana, for a bio to introduce herself, so she's smiling. So she had a long list of, all her daughter's talents and achievements. And I had to tell her, please tell me a little bit about yourself. And she laughed like she's laughing right now. And she told me a little bit about herself, but we will know more today as we speak to her. Archana is a proud mother of two special children. Her older child, her daughter, is hearing impaired, but she is a multi-talented young woman. Her younger son is autistic. And Archana herself is a pathologist, but does not practice. And she also supports other parents in this journey. So thank you, Archana, for agreeing to be part of this panel, and a warm welcome to you. We have Meher Dadabhoy. Thank you, Archana. We have Meher Dadabhoy. So Meher is a counselor by profession and a graduate of Gallaudet University, a university which is exclusively for deaf people, but which also admits hearing students at postgraduate level. Meher has worked extensively in India, the US, and Canada in various roles. She has worked in early intervention programs where she's worked with deaf school children and their families, and also with deaf adults. Also, she has worked with deaf-blind children. In 2000, Meher set up the first Indian Sign Language Interpreter Training Program and Indian Sign Language Teacher Training Program. And she's also set up and worked on various projects to teach English literacy to deaf adults through Indian Sign Language. And warm welcome to you, Meher. Thank you for joining us today. And it's my privilege also now to introduce to you Aqil Chinoy, who is the self-advocate on the panel today. Aqil was born to... Hi, Aqil, and a warm welcome to you. Aqil was born deaf to loving parents who face challenges in India's inaccessible environment for people with disabilities. Despite their own educational limitations, they were determined to ensure Aqil received proper schooling. After initially attending a school focused on oral education, Aqil later transitioned to mainstream school. He pursued his higher education in Gallaudet University in Washington, D.C., where he flourished in an environment that was accessible for him. There he became involved in various activities, honing his leadership and filmmaking skills while advocating for accessibility. He's a graduate with a bachelor's degree in computer science and information systems. After working as the head of information technology for over 15 years, he co-founded India Signing Hands Private Limited in collaboration with like-minded individuals. Through ISH, Aqil continues to advocate for the rights and inclusion of deaf community in India, which is the intention with which he returned to India. So thank you once again, Aqil, for being here and being part of this panel. So thank you so much. I think we'll move on to the panel discussion today. And to begin with, I would like to hand over to Meher to start off today's discussion. So over to you, Meher.
Thank you, Repti, and thanks everyone for joining in today. I just wanted to make a brief overview of deafness and how it's approached. So basically, there are two ways of approaching deafness. There is the medical way, which might be cochlear implants, hearing aids, speech training. And advocates of this method believe that deaf children must only speak and understand language auditorily, that is through the ears. And in India, typically, sign language is not permitted by advocates of this oral method of education. And because they have the mistaken belief that if a child signs, they will not speak. The other model or method is the linguistic model, which is sign language. And advocates of this, typically the deaf community and linguists, advocate using sign language with the child from birth, exactly like you would speak to a hearing child. Sign language is a visual language, and since hearing is compromised and the most difficult, often impossible for a deaf child, advocates of this method are not against deaf children learning speech, but believe that language acquisition is more important than speech. Speech being one part of language and the other part being writing. So deaf children are taught academic content through sign language. And since the critical years for learning language are 0 to 6 years, there's no lag in acquiring language, as the child can be exposed to a complete language in the same way a hearing child is. So there's a lot of conflict between these two groups, and a fear is instilled of sign language for young parents, as they're often told by important people in the diagnosis, like doctors, audiologists, and sadly even teachers, that they say things like, ignore a deaf child even when he points to indicate his needs. If, for example, a deaf child wants water and points to it, they mistakenly believe that you should make the child say water before you give it to him. Now, a signing parent would say in sign language, oh, you're thirsty. Do you want some water? So it's more natural. Because languages are seldom vocabulary based. Language is not just pen, house, water, drink, eat. Language is sentences, and languages convey a lot. So, as I said, language is not single word acquisition. Language learning is complicated, and in addition to vocabulary, grammar and paralinguistic features are often lost when a child is forced to learn it auditorily. Sign language users use sign language, a rich language, to learn academics and learn the written form of English, Hindi, or whatever language the parent chooses for them. To choose to exclusively use the auditory verbal method when deafness is diagnosed at an early age might not be beneficial to all children. When children are young, it is difficult to predict what other developmental disabilities or issues might be present as the child gets older. By limiting the child to only auditory verbal method, it is possible that the child will be exposed to no language. This obviously is very detrimental to language acquisition and the cognitive development of the child. To ban the use of sign language and only be verbal is akin to not letting a hearing Hindi-speaking child hear English, as it will impair the acquisition of the Hindi language. The human brain, especially the young child's brain, can learn multiple languages when presented at an early age. To limit a deaf child to only speech is harmful because he or she might never be able to get full language exposure because of the nature of the hearing impairment. AVT, or auditory visual therapy, has been beneficial to some people, and they identify as hearing when they become adults. It is the parent's decision for the young deaf child, and that is usually influenced by who they meet early on in the diagnosis. In India, it is typically the doctor, the audiologist, the speech therapist who help to influence this decision. I do believe it would be helpful for parents to meet deaf adults as well so that they can make informed decisions about their child. So
Correct.
over to you, Revati.
Thank you, Meher. Thank you so much for that. You giving us that broad perspective. But before we get into the panel discussion, there's something that I missed out, which I would like to do now. I have not introduced our interpreter today. We have Neelam Dalvi with us, and I'm really thankful to her for joining us today. She had slightly short notice, but she's here. Thank you so much, Neelam, for joining us today and doing the interpretation for us. Before we get into the panel discussion, just a few, webinar guidelines. That is, we will stay on mute. All of us will keep ourselves on mute while the panel discussion is going on. We can put questions on chat when the discussion is on, but post the panel discussion, we will open to Q&A when you can, raise your hand and unmute and ask your questions. And the questions in the chat will also be addressed then. So with that, we'll move to the panelists. And I would like to address Archana first. So we'll begin with Archana. Archana, like Meher shared a bit about, the different aspects and, about deafness and what's happening in this space, or what's, things that we should probably know about in this space. We would like to know from you, Archana, how or, when did you discover your child's hearing loss, and, how maybe you communicated it to her? When and how did you discover, and how did you communicate it to her, is something we'd like to know from you, Archana.
So it was like when Rashmi was around 3 to 4 months old. Some incident happened that a loud sound happened in the house. She was sleeping on the bed, and the bed's door, it fell, and that big sound didn't wake her up. So there I had a little doubt of it. Second incident was like within 3-4 days, she was crying too much. So I didn't have anything to make sound. Generally, we make some sound and we make the child stop crying. So I didn't have anything. So I just grabbed a alarm clock which was next to me, next to the bed. So hearing, I tried to make her quiet, but it didn't work. So there I thought that there's some issues with her hearing. But again, it was like we didn't have anyone with such issues in our family, either of the sides. So then my mother-in-law was not she was not agreeing to it. But then too, after convincing her, we took Rashmi to the doctor. Again, it was like the doctor said sometimes children don't respond to sound, so wait. But that waiting period went on till her first birthday. And I always regret that we wasted those golden days of her life, because she started wearing hearing aids maybe around when she was 1 year and 10 months old. But again, it was like the whole process in India, it takes a very long time. So all her tests and all everything, it went on for a longer period, and then she was diagnosed with profound deafness. Here again, it was like her hearing is good for percussion sounds, but for high frequency sound, she can't hear at all using hearing aids also. And as you said, Revati, how did I communicate to her. Sorry. So it was not me who communicated to her about her hearing loss. It was her whole diagnosis was done in Alia Varjang Institute, Bandra. So the speech therapist over there, Anuradha, she helped Rashmi to understand that Rashmi can't hear, and then she has to wear those hearing aids, which will help her to hear the sounds. So this way, she was made to understand that she's not able to hear, and then she was explained by Anuradha itself that how people wear specs. Maybe that was with action because Rashmi was not able to understand speech at that early stage. But then it was Anuradha who communicated to Rashmi about her problems. And then she only introduced Rashmi to sound for the first time.
Thank you, Archana. So even though Rashmi was quite young, you were able to communicate, the therapist was able to communicate with her regarding her condition. Yeah, thank you for that. With that, the question automatically leads to Aqil. Uh, so we were wondering, Aqil, how old were you when you got an understanding of being deaf?
Okay. So let me say that how did my father mother understand that I am deaf first? Okay. So about Archana, how you felt, I can understand that, but when my parents felt very differently. My parents were already deaf. So when they gave birth to me, they were already expecting and even hoping that they were already expecting that the child would be deaf. Because my father's father felt the same as Archana, how she felt. So they were actually very shocked, and the first son is deaf, and then they did not know how to manage, and they were trying to look for help, and it was the same situation. But for me, as a child, I felt that I was normal. I never really felt that, okay, I was deaf or anything, because my parents would communicate to me through sign language. And for me, everything was fine. I was never aware that I was different from other people. Only when I went for the audiogram, and when I went to get new hearing aids, that's when I realized that, okay, what is this noise? I never knew what is that noise. I never liked that sound. So it was like a disturbance for me. And so that time I was around 3 years old. And then later, I went to meet a few hearing friends, and that's when I realized, okay, I got that comparison that nobody was wearing a hearing aid, but I was wearing a hearing aid, and if I would remove it, there would be no noise, and then I would wear it, and there would be again be noise. So that's when I started realizing that I was different from others. So that's how I realized it. But as a child, I felt 100% normal. So that is the difference.
Thank you, Aqil. So it brings out that it can be so different when you have hearing parents of a deaf child and deaf parents of a deaf child. Things can be so different, and so thank you for bringing that out. Um, Meher, um, we would like to ask you, what would be next steps, when a parent discovers that their child is deaf or hard of hearing? What do you think would be the next steps for parents when they come to know? Meher, you're on mute.
Sorry. Typically, when a hearing parent, now not like Aqil's deaf parents, but when a hearing parent finds out that their child is deaf, they experience a range of emotions. It's, fear, depression, anger, why me? This thing is, I'll fix the problem. I need to fix these problems. So it's important for parents to get help for themselves as well as their child, because they feel they have so many emotions and so many worries. So I think the first step is for a parent to get help there, and then to understand, it's important for them to understand the nature of their child's loss, whether the child is hard of hearing, profoundly deaf, moderately deaf, whatever it is. And then based on that, to make educational decisions about the child. I strongly always recommend support groups, parent support groups. And I think it's very important for children of deaf parents to meet deaf adults and get their perspective on their journeys through this whole thing.
Thank you, Meher. And I feel you sort of brought out this webinar being different in bringing the parent and the self-advocate as experts, and you're actually recommending that parents talk to other parents and to deaf adults to get a better understanding and of how to support their children. Archana, so I'll come back to you now as a parent, taking off from where Meher talked about parents being experts. We would like to know a little bit about how has your experience been, how has it been for you as a parent of a deaf child? So how has it been, how has the experience been for you as a parent? So can you share a little bit about that?
So yes, as just now, ma'am said that for parents, it's really a turmoil of emotions going on when they get to know where they have a child with hearing loss or some of the other issues like. So it is like first they have to accept it, then they have to make the family members to accept it. And again, here it is like some are helpful, some family members are not helpful. So again, the parents have to go through all kind of ups and downs like tauntings and whatnot. So yes, the parents have to go through a roller coaster ride, having a special needs child. But if I always say that if your partner is strong, you don't need anyone. That is what has happened with me. In my case, it was like when Rashmi was diagnosed, so I could see people going away from us. And then I was blessed to have good people in my life at proper time. To give example is Meher ma'am. Then it was it was Kunda Tai from the same institute where I met Meher ma'am. So they were such strong support for me. So then there I felt that when I must try to keep this negative thinking people away from me for my children's better life. Because those negative thoughts and negative words used to hamper my mental health. But here again, first, it was myself as a mother. I accepted, I would say, very quickly. But for my husband, it took a bit time to accept things because he is very, very possessive. And he was more worried about like what would others say. So then it took a time for him, but then again, he later on when he was seeing the progress in Rashmi, he accepted it, and then things went on very well. And when my partner is strong with me, I don't really need anyone, so-called family members or support to stand in this society. Yes, again, as a parent, After the family comes the society. Here again, the schools, some were supportive, some were not. So again, I had to fight those issues also. Like there wasn't acceptance in the school from parents of Rashmi's class students. So some called her mad, some called her. So again, as a parent, we had to overcome that, and we had to go ahead with the positive approach and make the people understand. Again, as I say, there also in school I met some good people. The principal was very helpful. So it was like when Rashmi was, I just want to share one incident. When Rashmi was in the third standard, all the parents wrote an application to the principal that she's a mad girl, and she will have a bad effect on our children. So please remove her from, expel her from the school. But the principal said that I know that girl very well. So if you people have any issues, you are free to take your child away from the school, but I won't expel Rashmi. So again, yes, there, there also I got good support. And then regarding her other issues also, plus and minus points were there. But if we are positive and we stick to the positive approach, things go well.
Thank you, Archana. Really stood out, how you talked about acceptance and keeping that positive attitude, and, the way you strongly supported your child through her journey. It's really inspiring to hear that. Archana did speak about school, so that brings me to learning, how does learning look like for these children? So, Meher, I will come back to you and would like to know how, a deaf child, how should a deaf child be supported in learning? So, learning as in not just academics, but learning in general, academics and otherwise. How do you think a child should be supported?
So I think the main thing for any child, whether it be deaf, hearing, is communication. Is the most important ingredient for accessibility. So most learning occurs incidentally, not necessarily in school for a hearing child. For example, a hearing child will overhear and know what their sibling did in school that day. They'll be talking to their mom and telling the mother, oh, so-and-so did this and hit me, and then we played and we did X, Y, and Z. So it's all incidental. And so...
carry your bag. Hey, carry your bag.
Sorry.
The rest will continue tomorrow, okay? Yes,
Okay. Okay, sorry, I don't know what happened there. So hearing children can participate in mealtime conversation, overhear phone conversations. They have access to information that a deaf child does not. So I think it's very important for the deaf child to have access to this information as well. And this is possible if members of the family use sign language. If this does not happen, deaf children tend to feel very isolated. And often a deaf child will ask a parent, what were you talking to so-and-so about? And the parent might let them know in just, one sentence, oh, we were talking about X. And I often have heard deaf children complain that, that's not possible. You could have spoken just that, you spoke for so long. So it makes the deaf child feel that communication with them is in great detail is a burden, and they feel excluded. And needless to say, this has implications as the deaf child becomes an adult. So I think communication and information is the most important thing in learning.
Yeah, thank you, Meher, for sharing that with us. That communication is key, and from what I hear from you, it's like including the child in all that is happening by trying to have those giving the child more information than probably you would give the child, because there is no incidental learning for this child. Yeah. So moving to Archana again, since Meher talked about this communication with the child, and as a parent, how was it for you to support your child in everyday life, not just in learning or academics maybe, but in day-to-day life activities, which are really important for children to be able to learn and do themselves. So how was it for you to support your child, and how did you support your child in her everyday life?
So yes, to be frank, I have never seen my children as with some special disabilities or like. I have always treated them as good as normal children. So uh, going around or going through all her daily things, as we teach every single child, she was taught in the similar way. She lip reads everything, so through that I used to we communicate with her. Just now, as Meher ma'am said, that it is like when you have people conversing nearby. So the person who has hearing issues, when they want to know something, so the third person just tell them about the conversation in one line. So here again, I have till date, I am her interpreter. So I explain to her every detail what is being taught. She lip reads, and now with that lip reading, it is like she's become so much used to. If she is fond of TV, she's fond of watching TV, she's fond of watching movies. So for movies, it is like she can't lip read everyone. So we prefer going to movies which has subtitles. And regarding TVs, so if the regular artist, she starts lip reading them. So again, it has become easier for her to understand what is being talked by them, the dialogue she can understand. If she is not able to, or if she misses something, she'll ask, and I interpret that immediately to her. But when it comes to her father, he, as Meher ma'am said just now, he just explains her in a single line. So here again, there is some issues, but yes, she has learned to cope up with these things. I till now I have been her voice. She when she even conducts online workshops, so she shows all the things in action. She keeps on doing her artwork, and I become her voice as an interpreter. And every day, like being nowadays, generally online shoppings are there, so again the communication doesn't come becomes a barrier, so then it's easier for her to do. But in early stage, it was like everything she used to manage on her own. Whatever needs she wanted to buy something or anything, so we used to encourage her to go, and as she had speech, maybe the speech was not clear, but then we used to encourage her, and she used to go and buy and get her things on her own. So yes, she does that. Here again, I would like to mention is only she has issues with traveling. We have never left her alone. She doesn't travel independent, because apart from hearing loss, she has issues with severe migraine and low BP issues. So she gets her migraine attacks anywhere. And those are so severe that within no time she has to be admitted. So then always she was supported while traveling. So again, that is an issue which she has to overcome. Let's hope for the best. But yes, that she is not able to manage till yet.
Yeah, Archana, it was so lovely to hear the way you have very actively, made things accessible, tried to make things accessible for your child, to make her independent, despite whatever challenges that were there that you have faced. And you even talked about, being her voice, uh, you know, so that when I heard that, it automatically leads me to Aqil, to know from him, how has he been advocating for himself and his needs, so maybe Akil, if there is a story that you can share about how you advocated for yourself, and what you needed, and maybe how you did that.
Fine. So before I say that, I would just like to share about communication, the communication part that you have with your daughter. So I know that, the deaf people are raised differently. So in my situation, my parents were deaf, I was deaf. Communication was very easy, very smooth through sign language. But when I went to oral schools, they taught me to speak. I did that. I did well, orally. But when I would come home, I would only use sign language with my parents because it was our own language. And so one thing was strange that my teacher had come home and she told my parents not to sign with me. She told them to lip read, to like speak to me orally. So lost that communication link. Like me and my parents, we lost that. I myself was confused that why language is gone. How will I communicate with my parents? What is wrong with my father? Because they stopped signing with me. They tried to speak to me. So obviously, growing up, they had no knowledge of lip reading, and suddenly they were being told to speak with me, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. And then after a few weeks, my parents realized that this is wrong, and they went back to signing with me. So that was a very big change in my life. So we have to know that every deaf person's way is very different. How they are raised, their skill of lip reading and oralism is very different compared to other deaf. So for me, I do lip read. I went to a deaf school that practiced oralism. I studied till the third standard, and then I went to a hearing school. And there, the principal of the deaf school recommended me to go to a hearing school, basically, and I was fine with that. I went to a hearing school, but I faced a lot of struggles. When the teacher would write on the backboard, she would look at the board and speak. So how would I lip read her? There were many such situations that I could not understand. And even when Meher said, communication is important, and especially in the right environment where where people can respect everyone, where everybody's face to face, where you can lip read, assign, whatever, so that is the sign, right concept. So a lot of people are not aware about that. But anyway, when I talk about my self advocacy, I went to Gallaudet University. In Gallaudet, which is a university for the deaf, I achieved my bachelor's in computer science, and then I got I had a 3-month internship, and that company provided complete accessibility. So, and during college time and during my work life, I experienced no barriers. I had everything. But when I came back to India, I had decided that I wanted to work in India. And I went to a hearing company, and the company was great. People were amazing. But one of the biggest issues was communication and accessibility, because there was nothing in India at that time. And also because of that, since there was no accessibility, the MD of the company was he was a little hesitant to give me a job, because he didn't want to give me a good role in the company. I was recommended in the IT department, and I could have completely taken care of the entire department because I had all the knowledge. But the MD was a little hesitant. He gave me a low level job. Like he put me in the billing department, just put like late data entry work. But that's not what I really wanted to do. I accepted, and I said, I will be patient, and I start working from that level. And so that time, around 15 years back, hearing people, the staff would communicate with others in the office, through the telephone. They had the extension board. So they would call each other through the phone, through the extension, and talk to each other. But for me, it was very difficult. So if I wanted to meet anybody, I wanted to talk to anybody, I would have to walk over to them in the office. And that's when I realized that I need to do something. If I don't do anything, if I don't change my environment, then I will always be left out. So I did, and I would never grow because of that. So what did I do is I installed a chat software in all the computers. I went and installed it in each and every computer, and I informed the staff that if you want to talk to me, just open this and just send me a text message. That time there was no WhatsApp, there was no mobile, or there was no SMS, nothing. So I put this in the laptops. I installed it in everyone's computers, and then people started chatting with me. And then till now people stopped using the phone, they started using this chat. And that's how they did it for other staffs as well. So I made the environment accessible for my benefit. So that was one example. Second example is, so the new office was under renovation. So I made a proposal. I had a very long proposal, and I gave it to the MD. And I told him that when you're renovating the office, I want this. I want to put lights. So for example, if there's a lunchtime bell or there's an evening time bell or something, when the bell rings, I can't hear it. So they put lights that would flash at the time. So that way I made the room accessible. So then there was a staff sitting in front of me. So if I want to get their attention, I have to like call them. So I would press a button so the light would blink so the staff could look at me. There were many technical recommendations that I made to make my environment accessible. So that was that. And these are one of the many different things that I did. I really worked a lot. And at that time, the MD observed that, okay, I have a lot of skill and I'm hardworking. And that's when it built confidence in him, and then he started promoting me. And the last post that I held in that office was the head of the IT department. So I was completely responsible, and I was given all the responsibility from the level of a billing data clerk. I reached that level, where I was handling everybody. I had taken all the responsibilities of the computer, the data security, the servers, the emails, the CCTV footage, the ERP software systems, everything. So that is how a deaf person can prove that they can do and they can work beyond their barriers. So just a few examples of my self advocacy.
What a lovely story, Aqil. That was so beautiful to hear that you have advocated for yourself uh, and how you made the spaces accessible for yourself, and you yourself use technology to do that, use whatever you have learned to do that. So that was such a lovely story to hear. Thank you so much for sharing that. So while Aqil has been talking about how he has made things accessible for himself, Meher, I would like to move to you and ask you families take to make to ensure that the home environment about communication, but anything else that families can do the home
Revati,
environment
I
accessible
missed
for
your
their children.
question. I couldn't hear you clearly. Could you repeat that so I can interpret for Akil?
Sorry, did you all lose me
Yes, yes. I could not hear your question. Your voice was cracking. Could you please repeat that?
clearly now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. So I was just saying that, Aqil was talking about how he made things accessible for
Sorry,
himself.
Revati, you're cracking again. Yeah, go on.
I'm so sorry about that. No, I was just wanting to ask Meher, how can families, what steps can families take to ensure that the home environment is accessible and inclusive for their deaf child?
Again, it goes back to communication. And like Aqil said, simple changes in the house, doorbell with a light, just make the home a home where everything that is accessible for a hearing child is also accessible for a deaf child. And it would look different at different ages of a deaf child, for a child. Different age groups require different support systems. So for a young deaf child, I would do exactly what you would do for a hearing child, but I would do it facing the child. I would do it with signing to the child. I would do it by taking time off to explain to the child what we were going to do. We were going out. She needed to put on her shoes, and then, I actually explained the whole procedure so that the child can anticipate. Because, like I said earlier, there's no incidental learning for a deaf child. So just supporting the child in communicating and providing a very, very accessible environment in the home and socially outside as well. And
so I want to add to that. So, when you talk about making a home accessible, I know this very well because my father himself is deaf and he's very good. He's a very good engineer. And he was very adamant that he did not want to depend on hearing people for any small thing. So, what my father did is he installed lights for each and every door in the house. So in the kitchen and dining room, and even in the washroom, he had put a light over there. So for a deaf person, for a deaf child in a hearing family, the advantage is what the deaf child can sneak into the washroom and sit there for a long time. And if the parents are banging on the door, they will not hear. They'll be like, okay, I cannot hear anything. But for me, it was different. If I would go in the washroom, my parents would put a light in the washroom, and if they see that I'm out inside for a long time, they'll keep ringing the bell and the light will keep flashing. So then that would be like, okay, theek hai, I have to go now. Somebody's waiting for me. So because of that, just that is want to tell you that families can make homes accessible. Even then the telephone rang, there was a light that flashed. And even when the doorbell would ring, there was a light that flashed. Everything. So this way children will be encouraged. So you have to encourage them to watch videos of how such places are accessible. So for example, I've already made a video in our organization has created a video. We have a video. We have this organization called iSetch Kids, where the entire video, it has Indian Sign Language, it has voiceover and animations. So it's all three in one. It's completely accessible for the deaf kids. So I started this concept. Why? Because I noticed that so many deaf children were falling behind. They were falling behind with the hearing kids. Hearing kids could watch content, like they'd watch cartoons, videos, and all enjoy, but not the deaf. Deaf could not understand anything. Because of that reason, I started creating videos in Indian Sign Language, for kids. So I will share the link in the chat box for sure so you guys can see it.
Yeah, thank you, Aqil. Please do share that. And yeah, how this substitution for sound, by light can make so much difference to the world of a person with deafness and make things so much more accessible, at home and in workplaces. So now I'm just thinking that we'll shift gears a little bit here, and I want to ask Archana, a little bit about schooling. So just shifting gears and talking about schooling. So Archana, just can you tell us a little bit about how did you decide on which school your child should go to? And, a little bit about how schooling was for her.
So yes, I would say that from the age of 3.5, after her speech therapy in Alia Vajang, we got to know about the Central School for the Deaf, which is based in Agripada. Now it is known as the Central Society for the Education of Deaf, CSED. There, her all communication and her studies started in Marathi, which is our mother tongue. So then, after getting the pre-education from CSED, Rashmi was admitted in a normal school in Panvel from the first standard, and since then she had been to a regular school itself. But again, here the issue was I have done my studies in a convent, and I was very weak in Marathi. Marathi being a mother tongue, talking and writing with proper grammar, it was difficult for me to overcome that. But then, for her benefit, we preferred going to a Marathi medium school. We admitted her in a Marathi medium school. But when she was not a, as I said, that she lip reads everything. So you can say around 30 to 45% she could get what was being taught in the school. We used to make her sit on the first or second bench to lip read the teacher. But just now, when Aqil explained about that when the teacher used to write on the board, so the person is not able to lip read the teacher. So this way, I used to teach her the whole lessons at home. And again, here I had issues. So I used to buy English medium books as well as Marathi medium books. So first I used to study all the lessons in English, then in Marathi, and then I used to prepare notes to teach her. So then it was like before till date, I would say I make mistakes in writing Marathi. My children correct me, but yes, I had to get her admitted in Marathi medium because that was easier for her to communicate, and the society around, the family around us were Marathi speaking people, so English would have been tough for her. So we preferred her going to a Marathi medium school. And in school, she is not good in academics. She being an art lover. So we have never forced her to get passing was enough for us. In earlier stage when she didn't have much issues with the language or expressing her in many sentences, so there she used to get marks above distinction. But later on, then the marks went on down, but we never forced her to get. For us, getting passing out from that standard was uh, okay for us, as her passion was something else. So to have just completing her studies was important. So this way she completed her 12th, then she got admitted in the FY, but those studies were difficult for her to uh, adjust. So then by the end of first sem, she took a drop and she was unwell. So she took a drop from there. Later on, after a break of 1 year, she did her diploma in yoga. So then, and her dance sessions were dance programs were on. So we supported her in that. And here it is like everywhere, I would say, I've seen few parents, when I talk to parents also, here it is like people keep on forcing children to get academics, good in academics. In any way, they hit the children, they scold at the children, whatever. But if the child is good in some other, I would say that let the child learn that. So schooling or getting knowledge doesn't mean only the bookish language, bookish knowledge. Knowledge can be gained through other sources also.
Thank you, Archana. So we just heard loud and clear how to focus, how you have focused on your child's strengths and, work to support her on that. Aqil, if you would like to add anything here, because I know you've also gone to mainstream school after having gone to a school where there was taught orally. So if you'd like to add anything here.
So really, when I joined a hearing school, I started from the third grade, and that time my marks were very good. Okay, and then up to the seventh or to the eighth standard, the marks dropped. So that's because there were new words, there was a whole new vocabulary, a lot of technicalities, new concepts, a lot of science, complicated content. So it became tough. The teacher would speak very quickly, the time was short. So it was too many things at the same time. So then I started falling behind. So I think just like Archana, as she said, I was tutored and I was encouraged. My family's got a tuition teacher for me at home who would teach me, and who helped me catch up with what was going on in the school. And so the situation was similar. So deaf people need support, they need back end support. So I completed my 10th standard and I completed the SSC, and I passed, and then I moved to college. I went to a hearing college. But at that time, so from the 7th standard to the 10th standard, I studied a lot, I worked hard, and my time for enjoyment, whatever time I had to enjoy and play and socialize, was very less. I completely focused on my studies. So then again, when I went to college, I felt that I had lost all motivation to study. I felt I didn't really have the heart of it, because I thought, okay, again I have to lip read, again I have to I have to lip read and focus. So lip reading, as Archana said, 40 to 45% understanding is not enough. For me, to understand something, when I completely put my entire focus on lip reading, I'm trying to understand what the person is saying or the teacher is saying. I'll try to figure out the words. So all of my energy is spent on that. And then I have no energy left to actually understand the concept. So so a lot of the logic and so many concepts, I never really understood. I was so focused on the words of what is she saying, what is she not saying, and trying to actually clarify and avoid misunderstanding. All my energy went there. So that is why in college I lost all my motivation, and my family was obviously very worried, and they wanted to see me succeed. And that's when they saw me lose motivation, and then they realized something is wrong. And after doing a lot of evaluation and research, they found Gallaudet University, because in the Gallaudet, the teachers themselves are deaf and they use sign language and they communicate in sign language, and which is why I was sent there. And when I went to Gallaudet, the whole world changed for me. And now I can communicate with the teacher, now I can communicate with the students, and then everything there was completely accessible for me. So this is why I really excelled in my studies and I went ahead very quickly. So when you put deaf people in the right environment, a deaf person will for sure excel and develop very quickly. So that is one example of, what I felt at Gallaudet, and that changed my life. And it really helped me move ahead further. So I graduated in computer science. I learned how to become independent. So that was a very big impact for me.
Yeah, the right environment is key here, right? Um, so I'm just thinking, Meher, Aqil and Archana did share about the journey in school or, learning or academics, and how that there is this, Aqil talked about the support that is needed. So there are a lot of, and also he shared about some of the difficulties that he faced. So Meher, we'd like to know from you, what are, Okay. Okay.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. My screen
No,
went
it's
blank. Couldn't hear anything. Sorry.
no, it's okay.
I think what you were doing was reflecting on what Aqil said.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so
No, also Meher, I just wanted to know from you, what do what are probably some challenges that a child may face socially and emotionally, and how could they be supported? Uh, was something that was wanting to know from you.
okay, I just first wanted to reflect on what Aqil said because it's such an important component of being deaf. Aqil going to school, trying really hard, working, concentrating, and not able to do anything except listen to the spoken language and focusing so much energy into it. If he had had that information provided to him in sign language in the seventh standard or whatever it was, instead of when he went to college to Gallaudet, the world would have been so much easier and accessible. And it's lucky that Aqil was motivated enough. You were motivated enough to work hard and didn't lose interest. But what happens is when you don't have communication, being deaf can be extraordinarily isolating. And social isolation is the biggest thing that happens to deaf children of hearing parents. Uh, Communication barriers lead their children to feel so isolated that it's very difficult for them to form connections with their peers in school. And typically, they find themselves excluded from social interaction. And this leads to emotional problems, and it leads to a drop in self esteem and confidence. And it also leads to lower educational attainment and psychological distress in adulthood. And even for you, Archana, when you were talking about your daughter, I was thinking that if she had had access to sign language, even the academic part of it might have been more interesting and challenging for her. I mean, she's really lucky that she's good at art and has so many other skill sets. But the fact that, she has to concentrate so much on hearing, listening, lip reading, you are not able to do your best in academics. So I think the most important thing when it comes to deafness is communication and access.
Thank you, Meher, for bringing that out. How it can be socially and isolating for a child with deafness, and that communication is key. So here I'll just shift a little bit and would like to move to Aqil. Like we have been talking about this social and emotional isolation. So Aqil, we would like to know uh, if there are opportunities for deaf individuals to connect with other deaf adults, like for socializing and for support. Are there such opportunities? Any spaces?
As of now, when you're talking about India, we have deaf associations across India. So if a deaf person needs to connect with another deaf person or the community, they can go to the association. Secondly, earlier when I was growing up, there was no accessibility when it came to news. Now we have started a news channel for the deaf, basically. So if a deaf person, if deaf people are missing out on a lot of information when they're watching television, right? They're not able to understand that. So we have a news channel where we have videos in Indian Sign Language. It's called ISH News. So all our content is whether it is education, resources, everything a deaf person can watch and learn, and be at par with the hearing. We also have many NGOs currently, and hopefully they are fully aware about the deaf, and they are encouraging. So we have some job placement centers as well that focus on putting skilling the deaf people and putting them in the right jobs. And there are many such resources, small organizations that deaf people can go to. I really wish the government would do more and be involved in all of this, give more funds to such associations, so that, you know, these education centers, so that they can then grow even more and then support the deaf community even more. As of for now, the deaf community is suffering. There are no funds. There's a lot of everything is breaking down, but that's sad. But let's see. So a lot of number of associations are also reducing because of this, and that is a big issue. At the end of the day, it's the funds, but deaf people can go here. This is the place.
Thank you, Aqil. And also, I'm wondering if you could share that information with us, which we can share with the participants of this webinar by email post the webinar. If you can share, that would be of great help to all of us.
For sure, for sure. I will
Thank you.
surely do that.
Thank you so much. So, Aqil, there is, continuing what we talked about. I would also like to know, if how can, a person who is deaf, how can they embrace and celebrate their identity while, this uh, world is predominantly a hearing world, right? So, in this world, how can one embrace and celebrate their deaf identity? If you can share some insights.
Okay. From my childhood experience, I have never felt ashamed to be deaf. I know that I'm deaf, but so I never really thought that my problem is because I cannot hear. I have, so normally, you know, we have five senses, right? For me, since I cannot hear, so that means I have missed one sense. I never really thought that. For me, when my skill kind of moved on to the other senses. So if you see, many deaf people have very sharp vision. They even the slightest movements, you know, a deaf person can catch. So they can feel more. There's a feeling sense increases. So everybody has such heightened skills, you know. So a senses. So I've never really been ashamed to be deaf. I know I can contribute a lot to the community as well, and to the people. What you know, the same concept of support and being independent for all deaf people. And if you say, actually, at that time, many people were not aware of what is deafness, and they don't know what do you mean by sign language. Now the time has changed. So the situation has improved. Concept is still needs to be worked on, but now people, you know, we've started movies, we've translating movies, we're providing accessibility, there is accessibility in the news that we're doing. So the world is changing. They're finally realizing, okay, what is deafness? And when the environment changes, when there is awareness about the deaf people, then automatically deaf people will feel independent and proud to have their own identity. So they will not feel ashamed to be deaf anymore. So, but only if the environment has to change. Once that happens and there is accessibility for the deaf people to develop and to change, meaning what? By change, I mean something very simple. The hearing people can just learn sign language, understand, okay, this person is deaf, try to, you know, collab with these people, collaborate with the deaf people, involve deaf people, then deaf people will of course feel independent and equal.
Yeah, there's so much that people don't know about the deaf world. So I think this panel today has given us so much to go back with. So really thankful to you for that, and also looking at the time that we are almost, we have almost come to the end of today's webinar. But before we move on to questions, I would like to ask both Archana as well as Aqil. We can start with Archana. What is their message that they would like to convey to the audience today?
So yes, here it is like if I want to address to the parents of hearing impaired children. See again here it is like there are two different persons. Akil's thing is like his parents are deaf, he is deaf, so the surroundings around him are again in a different scenario. Everything over there, everything around him is different. In our case, it is like Rashmi is the only person, we don't have anyone around. So again, she was introduced at a very early stage with the hearing aids, with speech. So if it is in such case, then I would advise the parents that if you find that your child has some hearing loss, and if the child is able to go for a cochlear implant, go immediately for it, which will help them to listen to the sounds very quickly, and their everything would be accessible very early to the child, or finding a proper hearing if the child, for Rashmi it is like she can't go for cochlear because she has that migraine issues, but then she can go with good kind of hearing aids. So picking the proper hearing aids at a very early stage, and giving the child proper speech therapy and the language development, and helping the child to make proper use of the child's hearing aids. For example, it is like Rashmi being a profound deaf person, but now it is like after having such a loss, she is able to hear almost all the sounds, because here it is like we have made her understand the sounds. Again, we have to make things accessible for her. So, balancing everything for the child is very important. The society at large and the deaf society. So, balancing both the things are very important.
Thank you, Archana. You brought out a very important aspect of hearing parents of deaf children, and what you must do as parents. Thank you for that. But what you shared also sort of reminded me that, while this webinar we have focused on people who have experienced or chosen, signing, we acknowledge that, cochlear implant is also being considered by many families. And we are considering to do a separate session to address that, and we will keep you posted on that when we do a session on cochlear implants. But coming back to Aqil, what would you like to convey? What is your message to the audience today?
Okay, for the audience. Okay. Okay. So before I give the message, I just wanted to give a short explanation. So many deaf people, in my experience, and myself included, while growing up, deaf people don't want to be fixed. Meaning, you forcing a deaf person to hear, or forcing a deaf person to try to match up to the society or the situation. They don't want that. Our situation is very different. What we want is, we want the society to adapt the environment, to be friendly. It has to be accessible for the deaf. So when we are born deaf. God has given us this way. We have accepted whatever God has gifted us. We have amazing skills, except hearing. We have so many different skills. What we want is not to be fixed. What we want is the society to understand us and the environment to adapt accordingly, and making things accessible for the deaf. So this is a different perspective which we can discuss at a later stage. So my message, okay, sorry, one more example I like to give is that the environment, just the example of the environment that I'm talking about, when you have stairs, right? And when you have somebody with a physical disability on a wheelchair, you cannot force that person to get off the wheelchair and walk on the stairs, right? So what we do is we provide them a ramp. So this is another accessible tool, accessible feature for a person on a wheelchair to go up. It's a very similar concept. When you have deaf people, the deaf people have tools. Sign language is a tool, it is their own language. So what we can do, so what we as a society can do is just learn sign language, make everything accessible for the deaf, and then the deaf people will automatically succeed in life. Just a concept. So my last message that I would like to share for the audience and for the community is, try to learn sign language, try to involve deaf people in your community, encourage, uh, communicate with the deaf, understand their situation, promote inclusion, so that the deaf people can then work at par with as all of you.
Thank you. Thank you for that powerful message, Aqil. Thank you all. Thank you to the panelists for being here and sharing such valuable insights with us. It's been so wonderful having you here and listening to all that you shared.